In the heart of Virginia's rolling countryside, Busch Gardens Williamsburg has built a legacy of immersive lands and unforgettable rides. Since its debut in 1975, the park has constantly evolved, welcoming new innovations while saying goodbye to many beloved attractions. From long-lost coasters and groundbreaking simulators to towering rides and scenic monorails, each one tells a story of creativity and change. Take a journey through time to explore 10 vanished rides that once graced the Busch Gardens landscape. In 1976, Busch Gardens Williamsburg introduced its second German-themed land, Oktoberfest, a Bavarian-inspired area filled with traditional architecture, new eateries, and a growing number of attractions. Among the new additions that season was a small children's roller coaster with a fittingly gentle name, Das Kätzchen, which translates from German as the kitten. Tucked into a quieter section of the Oktoberfest area, Das Kätzchen was a classic Alan Herschel Little Dipper, a popular kiddie coaster model built to introduce young riders to the excitement of roller coasters. Though modest in scale, it offered a full roller coaster experience, complete with a small lift hill, shallow drops, and gentle curves, all scaled for younger children. The ride featured a single 3-car train, with each car seating up to 4 riders for a total capacity of 12 per cycle. Riders sat 2 across in 2 rows per car. Unlike most Little Dipper installations, this version had a unique twist. Because part of the ride sat on uneven ground, several of the coaster's support columns had to be extended to level the track, accommodating the natural slope of the hillside it was built on. The ride followed the standard Little Dipper layout. Leaving the station, it encountered a short lift hill, followed by a gentle first drop and a series of small hills and shallow turns. The experience was short, but was ideal for children experiencing their first roller coaster. Das Kätzchen operated from 1976 until the end of the 1983 season. It was removed ahead of the park's major expansion in 1984, which brought in Big Bad Wolf and marked a turning point in the park's thrill ride offerings. Unlike its neighbour, Die Wildkatze, which found new life at other amusement parks, Das Kätzchen was quietly dismantled and scrapped. It was never relocated, and no trace of the coaster remains today. Though its time in the park was brief and its legacy limited, Das Kätzchen was part of the foundation of Oktoberfest's original attraction lineup. It served as a stepping stone for younger guests, a ride remembered fondly by those who took their first coaster laps on its modest hills. And while it never made headlines, it played a small but important role in the park's early years. Today, its hillside plot has been completely transformed, folded into the ever-evolving footprint of Busch Gardens' German-themed section. But for a short time in the late 70s and early 80s, a little kitten coaster quietly purred among the larger thrills. Tucked away in the German-themed Rheinfeld village stood a compact but thrilling steel roller coaster named Glissade. Opening with the park in 1975, Glissade was one of Busch Gardens' original attractions and helped introduce guests to a new era of sleek, modern coaster design. Manufactured by the legendary Schwarzkopf, Glissade was a Jetstar 3 model, a type better known under its more marketable name, Jumbo Jet. Visually, Glissade made a bold impression. The coaster featured a deep red track supported by a framework of brown steel columns, blending well with the surrounding rustic architecture. Trains were single cars, with riders seated in line, one behind the other in pairs, giving it the look and feel of a bobsled car. Despite its relatively small footprint, the ride loomed large in its corner of the park, taking advantage of clever design to pack in a fast-paced layout with minimal space. Glissade's layout began with an electric spiral lift. Small electric motors propelled the train up a tight circular helix, rather than using a conventional chain. The ascent was smooth and steady, building anticipation with every slow turn. Once at the top, the train immediately dropped into a series of tight figure-8-style turns, some of them steeply banked at up to 70 degrees. The ride culminated in a fast-paced spiralling finale, before the train hit the final brakes. When it opened, Glissade represented a shift in what roller coasters could be. Steel coasters were still relatively new to the American theme park landscape, and Schwarzkopf's compact portable designs were gaining popularity for their reliability and thrilling layouts. Glissade fit perfectly into Busch Gardens, combining European themes with authentic German engineering. After 10 seasons, Glissade closed permanently in 1985. The coaster was then sold to Mexico, where it reopened as Tornado, first at La Feria Chapultepec, Mexico, and later at Selva Mágica in Guadalajara. Back in Virginia, its former site was eventually reused for Wild Mouse, Curse of DarKastle, and as of 2023, the new DarKoaster. Though Glissade itself is long gone, it remains a classic Schwarzkopf steel coaster that helped define Busch Gardens Williamsburg's opening era coaster lineup. When Busch Gardens Williamsburg opened for its second season in 1976, it came with a major expansion, the introduction of Oktoberfest, a new German-themed area filled with Bavarian architecture, beer gardens, and one of the park's earliest roller coasters. That coaster was Die Wildkatze, a compact but thrilling steel ride from legendary manufacturer Schwarzkopf. Positioned near the front of Oktoberfest, Die Wildkatze stood out with its deep red track and dark supports, threading a small fun layout just steps from the main midway. It was a model known as the Schwarzkopf Wildkatze, a portable style design that utilised a tight footprint. The trains featured single cars, each holding 4 passengers in 2 rows. This setup gave the ride a more intimate and unpredictable feel, perfect for surprising riders with quick turns and sudden drops. Though relatively modest in height at just over 44 feet, the ride delivered. After climbing the short lift hill via chain, the car crested the top and began a series of fast dips and slow bank curves. The layout included 2 helixes, one tighter and more forceful, the other drawn out as the car worked its way back towards the station. There were no inversions, but that didn't stop Die Wildkatze from becoming a satisfying thrill for parkgoers, especially at a time when looping coasters was still a novelty. Die Wildkatze operated from 1976 to 1983. As the park expanded and introduced larger attractions, the ride was removed at the end of the 1983 season. Its former footprint was used for the station building of Big Bad Wolf, which would open in 1984 and become a defining part of the Oktoberfest area for decades. But Die Wildkatze was not gone for good. In 1984, the ride was relocated to Playland Park in Rye, New York, where it operated as Wildcat until 1991. It later moved to Steel Pier in Atlantic City, and then to Williams Grove Amusement Park in Pennsylvania, running there until 2005. Its final and current home is Adventure Park USA, Maryland, where it still operates today as Wildcat. While its surroundings have changed, the layout and pacing remain classic Schwarzkopf, full of fast drops and tight curves. Though it never reached the famous from the park's later coasters, Die Wildkatze was an important step in Busch Gardens Williamsburg's early development. It helped to establish Oktoberfest as a thrill-focused area, and introduced a generation of guests to the quick, clever pacing that Schwarzkopf was known for. When Busch Gardens Williamsburg opened in 1975, it was part of something much larger. Just a few years earlier, in 1972, Anheuser-Busch had opened a new brewery in Williamsburg, and by the following year, a hospitality centre had joined it. With the launch of the theme park next door, the company introduced a unique attraction that connected both properties, the Eagle One monorail. This wasn't just a simple park ride. Eagle One was a genuine form of transportation, ferrying guests from the theme park to the brewery's hospitality centre, where complimentary beer samples and behind-the-scenes tours awaited. The experience gave Busch Gardens a distinctly adult-friendly twist, and was a major draw during the park's early years. Unlike the suspended-style monorails used at other Busch parks, Eagle One's vehicles rode above the track, offering smooth, elevated views across the park's natural landscape. The monorail glided along an oval track, providing not just a change of scenery, but a moment of cool relaxation. In fact, it was known for having some of the best air conditioning in the entire park, a welcome relief on hot Virginia summer days. The boarding station was located in between Hastings and Aquitaine, tucked behind the aviary in the park's more tranquil garden section. From there, the monorail quietly departed the theme park and made its way towards the brewery complex, crossing open land and providing views that are long gone today. At its destination, guests could sample beer, explore displays on the brewing process, and watch films about Anheuser-Busch's history. All part of a corporate hospitality strategy designed to promote the brand's values and legacy. But times changed. As the brewing business and theme park operations slowly began to separate, the cost of operating a dedicated monorail system began to outweigh its benefits. In 1998, after 23 years of service, the Eagle One monorail was quietly retired. The track and supports were removed over the following year, and very little physical evidence of the system remains today. Although many park guests may have forgotten it, for others, Eagle One was a unique part of a visit to Busch Gardens. It was an era when a theme park visit could include world-class coasters, live shows, and 2 free beers. In the early 1990s, Busch Gardens Williamsburg introduced guests to a different kind of thrill. Far from the towering drops of its coasters, this attraction offered a journey driven by story, visuals, and motion, a simulator ride called Questor. Opening in 1990 as part of the English-themed Hastings area, Questor was an adventure unlike anything in the park at the time. Housed inside a castle structure, guests entered through a torchlit tunnel, met a gnome named Alwyn, and were told they'd be boarding his latest invention, a vehicle on a mission to retrieve a magical crystal. Alwyn's voice echoed through the pre-show as he explained the craft's powers. It could fly, float, tunnel underground, and even shrink in size. Once seated inside the motion simulator, complete with seatbelts and surround sound, the room would spring to life. Through synchronized movements and a custom-produced film, guests flew through caverns, plunged down waterfalls, and dodged fantastical creatures. At the time, this was cutting-edge technology. Built by Reflectone, a company known for military and commercial flight simulators. The response was strong. Guests praised its clever story, whimsical characters, and surprisingly convincing motion effects. So much so, a clone was built just a year later at Busch Gardens, Tampa Bay. But while the concept was popular, it wouldn't last long. By 1995, Questor had taken its final journey. In its place came a series of new simulator experiences. In 1996, King Arthur's Challenge opened, updating the film but keeping the original motion platform. Using early CGI, the ride told the story of Merlin, shrinking guests down to recover Excalibur from an evil knight's castle. Despite the mythic theme, it never matched the charm or success of its predecessor. Then in 2001, the entire Hastings area was transformed into Ireland. With the change came Corkscrew Hill, a mystical adventure through Celtic folklore, filled with trolls, witches and fairies. The simulator format remained, but the experience was refreshed, with a new queue, new characters, and a story that captured imaginations once again. Corkscrew Hill ran until 2009, before giving way to Europe in the Air, an ambitious attempt to replicate flying theatres, with a fast-paced aerial tour of European landmarks. But without the immersive dome screen or graceful motion, it lacked the magic of other versions. It quietly closed in 2016. Finally, in 2018, the building reopened as Battle for Air, the first North American motion simulator to incorporate virtual reality headsets. Guests joined Addie, a guardian fairy, to defend the other world from a dark force. While the ride offered both VR and non-VR options, and even included nods to Questor and other past films, it too has since closed. Today, the original Questor building still stands, tucked behind the island area, and while its contents have changed, its legacy endures, a reminder of when theme park storytelling didn't rely on height or speed, but on imagination, movement, and a gnome with a crystal to find. In the early 1990s, Busch Gardens Williamsburg was riding high. The park was expanding rapidly, with a reputation for immersive theming and European charm. But as the roller coaster arms race heated up across the country, the park set its sights on a new steel coaster that would push boundaries. In 1992, that vision became a reality, with the debut of Drachen Fire. Located in the Oktoberfest section of the park, Drachen Fire was a striking presence. The ride's twisted blue track soared over silver supports, framed by the rooftops and turrets of a Bavarian village. Its wood-framed station buildings, designed to match the style of the park's German-themed area. At 150 feet tall and reaching speeds of around 60 miles per hour, it was one of the largest and most ambitious projects Busch Gardens had ever taken on. The coaster was designed and built by Aerodynamics, a company known for its iconic looping coasters. At the time, Drachen Fire was intended to showcase what Arrow could do with a modern layout. When it opened to the public on April 4, 1992, it drew immediate attention. The ride featured 6 inversions, unusual elements, and a packed, aggressive layout that crammed a lot of action into just over 3,500 feet of track. The ride began with a climb up the lift hill, followed by a sudden and dramatic dive drop, a steep curving descent that immediately threw riders into a 120-foot wraparound corkscrew. From there, it hit a sharp camelback hill, delivering a quick pop of airtime before plunging into a double inversion batwing. The train then climbed into a mid-course brake run before entering the second half, which originally featured another corkscrew, a cutback element, and a final corkscrew, all taken at high speed. It ended with a ground-hugging helix that spiralled back into the final brakes. The coaster made a bold first impression, and in its early days, Drachen Fire attracted crowds eager to try the park's latest thrill. Some coaster fans praised its intensity and unusual layout, but not everyone was impressed. Almost immediately, guests began to complain about the ride's comfort. Its rapid transitions and tight inversions caused neck and back pain for some riders. And its distinctive layout, while innovative, was also unforgiving. In an effort to improve the ride experience, Busch Gardens made a key change in 1995. The corkscrew that followed the mid-course brakes was removed entirely, reducing the number of inversions from 6 to 5. The hope was to soften the second half and reduce the jarring transitions that had become a common complaint. But even with the adjustment, Drachen Fire never quite shook its reputation for roughness. By the late 1990s, the park had shifted focus. Newer rides like Alpengeist, a smooth and forceful B&M inverted coaster that opened in 1997, drew attention away from Drachen Fire. And with its popularity fading and maintenance demands rising, the decision was made to quietly retire the ride. Drachen Fire closed in July 1998, just 6 years after opening. It remained standing but not operating for several years, before being dismantled in early 2002. For a long time, the old Drachen Fire site remained quiet. The station building stood empty, sometimes used during seasonal events like Howlo Scream, but the lawn around it was mostly left undeveloped. Drachen Fire quickly became one of the most talked about defunct rides in the park's history. Today, the site has finally been brought back to life. A new family inverted coaster, the Big Bad Wolf: The Wolf's Revenge, opened in 2025, featuring a smoother, more accessible experience, and one that reflects how much the industry has learned since the days of Drachen Fire. In 1996, Busch Gardens Williamsburg added a new family roller coaster to the Oktoberfest area, Wild Izzy. A steel wild mouse ride named in honour of that year's Summer Olympic Games mascot. Busch Gardens was a sponsor of the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta, and the ride's original theming reflected that partnership, with bright, colourful cars decorated in Olympic colours, lightning bolts and stars. Manufactured by Mäch, The ride followed the company's standard Wild Mouse layout: tight hairpin turns, sudden drops, and short straightaways, packed into a compact footprint. The lift hill rose a modest 46 feet, but what it lacked in height, it made up for in intensity. Riders sat in individual four-person cars, navigating a relentless series of switchbacks and dips that often felt sharper than they appeared. The design emphasised sudden lateral forces, and the layout was known for feeling just a little out of control, an effect that delighted some and surprised others. The coaster was rethemed in 1997, dropping the Olympic references and becoming simply Wild Mouse. Though it didn't draw the same attention as the park's larger thrill rides, Wild Mouse fitted an important niche. It was accessible to younger guests and families, yet it still offered a surprisingly sharp ride experience. Early press reviews noted the unexpected intensity of the turns, with one guest joking that the ride was scarier than you might think. Another described it as not for tall people, referring to the cramped legroom in the small cars, a common feature on Wild Mouse designs. After 7 seasons, Wild Mouse closed at the end of 2003 to make way for a much more ambitious attraction. Its removal cleared the way for Curse of DarKastle, a dark ride that would redefine the space in both scale and style. But unlike many removed coasters, Wild Mouse didn't vanish. In early 2004, the ride was quietly relocated to Busch Gardens' sister park in Tampa, where it reopened as Cheetah Chase. It continued to operate there for nearly 2 decades, later renamed Sand Serpent, before finally closing in 2023 to make room for a new family coaster, Phoenix Rising. Though it may not stand out in the same way as its successors, Wild Mouse served its purpose well. It bridged a gap between small family rides and larger steel coasters, and its sharp turns and sudden drops introduced many guests to their first taste of coaster thrills. In the summer of 1984, Busch Gardens Williamsburg introduced what would become one of the park's most iconic roller coasters. Big Bad Wolf was a suspended roller coaster built by Aerodynamics and promised guests the chance to travel at the speed of fright. With suspended coasters still a rarity at the time, this one quickly set itself apart, thanks to its unique location, bold theming, and dramatic drops over the park's wooded terrain and Rhine River. Riders boarded in a Bavarian-style village at the back of the park. The journey began with a small dip and gentle turns, before climbing the first lift hill. At the crest, trains plunged into a twisted sequence of tight curves through a German town, with buildings placed deliberately close to swinging cars. The motion of the suspended trains gave the illusion of near misses, as riders weaved through the timber-frame facades and around blind corners. After the village section, the train slowed briefly, before climbing a second lift. That's where the true highlight of Big Bad Wolf began. At the top, riders suddenly dropped nearly 100 feet, hurtling towards the riverbank at nearly 50 miles per hour, before swinging out in a dramatic curve just above the waterline. The layout concluded with one last series of swinging curves through the forest, before returning to the station. It was a ride full of contrasts, tight turns and wide swings, fast drops and slow climbs, village streets and river views. And throughout it all, the cars remained suspended beneath the track, giving every twist a greater sense of motion. Big Bad Wolf was a critical and fan success. It consistently appeared in coaster rankings throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s, and developed a loyal following. For many parkgoers, it was their first big coaster, and for others, it was a must-do every visit. But by the late 2000s, the ride was showing its age. Aerodynamics had gone bankrupt in 2002, and sourcing parts had become increasingly difficult and expensive. The intense lateral forces, combined with the unique location over the river and woods, made Big Bad Wolf costly to maintain. In July 2009, Busch Gardens announced the ride would be closing after 25 years of operation. It ran its final laps on September 7th that same year. While the ride was removed, its legacy endured. The original station, footers and even parts of the queue were reused for Verbolten, which opened on the same site in 2012. Verbolten's finale, A Sudden Drop Over the River, is a direct tribute to the Wolf's most famous element. And in 2025, the story continued with Big Bad Wolf: The Wolf's Revenge, a modern inverted coaster that brought the name back to the park for a new generation. Even years after its final run, Big Bad Wolf remains one of the most fondly remembered coasters in Busch Gardens history. A ride that combined theme, thrill and setting in a way few attractions ever have. In 2005, Busch Gardens Williamsburg unveiled one of its most ambitious attractions to date. Curse of DarKastle, located in the Oktoberfest section of the park, marked a major leap forward for Busch Gardens. Combining the immersive storytelling of a dark ride with cutting-edge 3D projection and modern simulator technology. The ride replaced Wild Mouse, which had stood on the site until 2003. In its place rose a towering stone facade, styled like a haunted Bavarian castle, its icy spires looming over the surrounding village. The story inside followed Prince Ludwig, a once noble heir twisted into a cruel and ghostly presence. Guests were invited into his cursed home, stepping into sleigh-shaped ride vehicles that would take them deeper into his story. Curse of DarKastle used a mix of physical sets, digital projections, motion-based ride vehicles, wind and water effects, and 3D visuals to bring its narrative to life. As the sleighs moved through the castle's halls, they spun, pitched and tilted to match the action on screen, sometimes seeming to fall through the floor or race down crumbling staircases. The visuals were ambitious for the time. The 3D animation paired with the onboard audio and physical effects to create a fast-paced haunted experience that was part ghost story, part thrill ride. It was widely praised at opening for its impressive technology and bold theming, standing out among regional theme parks for attempting something so complex. Over time, though, Curse of DarKastle struggled to maintain its popularity. While the visual effects were once cutting edge, they began to show their age as 3D technology advanced rapidly in the years that followed. Operational costs were also significant, with a ride system that was more complex than most in the park's lineup. Announced as closing in September 2017 for Howlow Scream, Busch Gardens later stated that Curse of DarKastle would not reopen. The castle building itself remained standing, repurposed for seasonal walkthrough attractions during the park's Halloween and Christmas events. For several years, fans speculated on whether the ride would return or be replaced entirely. In 2023, the park finally debuted a permanent replacement. DarKoaster escaped the storm. Opening on the same site and reusing the former DarKastle show building to house an indoor family-friendly launch coaster. Although Curse of DarKastle only operated for 12 years, it left a lasting impression. For many guests, it marked Busch Gardens' most ambitious foray into dark ride territory. An atmospheric indoor experience, unlike anything else the park had attempted before or since. In September 2010, Busch Gardens Williamsburg unveiled a 2-year expansion plan for its Oktoberfest area, featuring a new drop tower called Mäch Tower. This German-themed thrill ride would replace the park's aging Scrambler ride, later located to the New France area. Mäch Tower debuted in a festive Bavarian style. Its base was surrounded by 2 concentric rings of pillars, draped with blue, orange and red Oktoberfest banners. The ride vehicle itself was a 30-seat circular gondola. The area above the seats featured a large blue frieze, adorned with painted doves, crests and other German festive motifs, and the queue sat under a wooden Bavarian lodge awning. Busch Gardens even installed onboard speakers, so classical European-style music could play through the ride's ascent, part of the state-of-the-art special effects promised by the press release. Mäch Tower lifted riders up nearly 240 feet over the Oktoberfest village and sent them plummeting downward at high speed on what was Busch Gardens Williamsburg's tallest ride. The ride cycle began with a slow climb to the top, rotating riders 3 full turns so everyone enjoyed a panoramic view of the park and the river below. At the 238-foot apex, the music ended in 3 dramatic notes. After a brief pause and a rumbling shake, the gondola suddenly dropped straight down. Riders hit 50 miles per hour and felt weightless for a few seconds, before a magnetic braking system smoothly slowed the descent. Over its run, Mäch Tower logged mixed reviews and a few headaches. The ride's over-the-shoulder harness and belt sensors sometimes failed to latch for very tall or larger riders. Reviews were divided. Some felt Mäch Tower was an off-the-shelf model, lacking Busch's usual storytelling, while others praised its craftsmanship. Many felt the force provided by the drop to be underwhelming, especially when compared to the taller drop tower at nearby King's Dominion. Mäch Tower even became part of the festive celebrations each Christmas season, with Busch Gardens repackaging the ride as Mäch Tower. In this holiday variant, the drop element was disabled, and the car became a slow observation tower, giving guests a 360-degree view of the park's lighted Christmas town decorations. In December 2022, the park announced that Mäch Tower would permanently close on January 8, 2023. Busch Gardens cited overall guest satisfaction as a factor. Due to extreme winter weather, the park was closed on January 8th, so the last day of operation was in fact January 7th. Demolition crews moved quickly, and the tower was completely demolished within 3 weeks of closing. Though its lifespan was relatively brief, Mäch Tower became a distinctive landmark. While it never reached the iconic status of Busch Gardens coasters, Mäch Tower stood as a bold addition to Oktoberfest, offering a decade of high-level thrills before quietly vanishing from the skyline. Over the years, Busch Gardens has retired rides to make way for the new. From thrilling coasters to family favourites, each played a role in shaping the park's unique character. While they may be gone, their stories remain part of its identity. As the park continues to grow and change, one thing is certain: it's always building on the legacy of what came before.